It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, August 30th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is taking this Labor Day weekend seriously with our topic of the day.
Yeah, everything's serious on the show, isn't it?
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, it is Labor Day weekend in these here United States. And I think, we think about Labor Day weekend as the end of summer, and that is true. For some
Weather-wise,
people,
it's not true, but yeah, it's
no, but we think about it that way in a
yes,
lot of ways. For some people, it's their last trip down the shore for the year,
right.
especially in the Philadelphia area. But I think,
Rita's water ice closes soon. Yeah,
oh, that makes me so sad. Anyway, I love water ice so much. Anyway, it is Labor Day weekend, which is serious in a lot of ways, talking about the labor movement and such. And as is the case in most major sports, there is a players' union that negotiates with the league for the NHL. And so we thought we would talk about the existing CBA that the players and league have in place and what's going on and could go on in the next CBA and points of contention. So our current CBA in the NHL was signed in January of 2013 and was originally going to expire in 2022. However, COVID changed all of that. So as a part of the return to play process, this feels like a decade ago, but it was really just a couple years ago now. The owners and the players agreed to an extension and included the return to play requirements and all of that, which was important because there had to be a negotiation here as part of that. And so they extended it 4 more years through the 25-26 season. So right now we have 2 more years left in the current contract, and it will technically expire on September 15th, 2026.
yeah, it's getting close, and Bill Daly is being asked about it. And he says, don't worry, there's time. But remember, Marty Walsh is new. Like he's going to have his
Yep.
own ideas, so they really need to get to the table soon. But we know how these things go, Rachel. Everything seems to be last minute, always.
Yeah, and interestingly, if we recall, James Van Riemsdyk, who was on the Flyers at the time, was part of that negotiating committee. So
Yep,
it had for the Flyers players at least, they had some real skin in the game
they
and
did.
had direct representation in the negotiation, which was really good for the Flyers players. And I just keep wondering if the Flyers will have representation like that the next time around. Is there a veteran that's going to step up and be part of that committee?
It could be Scott Lawton, but he could also be playing somewhere else. So I don't know.
Ugh, yeah, that's a whole other topic that we have
That's a
talked about
whole
it.
other show, folks.
And I know we will talk about it in the future, I am sure. Talking about the extension in particular, they had to be again because of COVID and missed games and all of that, and the famous HRR hockey related revenue topic, which
The famous buzzwords that we
I
remember
know,
very well.
we all became experts in what that was.
We did. Absolutely, we did.
In our own way. So it allowed for the escrow adjustments for all of that, as if we recall. God, I'm having math nightmares already.
Yep.
But the cap stayed the same for the 2021 season. It created the conditions to allow the cap increases that we saw last season and this upcoming season with the bigger jump, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was like what was it, 5 million it went up, something like that. And yeah, right now I think they're still in the safe zone, but I'm going to be honest, there's going to be a point where I don't think they're in the safe zone anymore.
Well, and we'll get to what topics are going to be under contention for this next negotiation, but I definitely think how HRR and escrow and all of that is handled is going to be a topic they will discuss. Now, another big part of the extension was allowing for the return to the Olympics. Though they didn't get it together in time for Beijing, they did, of course, for Italy, and that's why we're having this Four Nations tournament and all of that. So I think that was a really good part of that extension.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. But like, for instance, this is my whole thing with the payroll number is I think when you get to, I don't know, around 90 is where you're in the danger zone. If we go back, the Rangers in 2000 were at 58.9 million. Now again, if we forward that to what that money is today, uh it's probably a scary number. And the Flyers were at 47 million at number 2.
Man, hockey players just do not get paid the way that other
No, I
male
know.
pro
But if you
athletes do.
but I'm going to amortize that. We'll keep talking. I'll amortize that and see what that is now.
Yeah. So we had the Olympics negotiation, part of that extension, like I talked about. But the other thing is they addressed the NHL minimums and rookie contract numbers, which was important, right? If you're going to sign an
Yes.
extension, the players had to negotiate to get those numbers to go up because inflation, cost of living, like you have to have a basic minimum increase for these players. So that is why the NHL minimum is now 775K. That'll take place through the 25-26 season, but has been stagnant for the last 3 seasons, or for those 3 seasons. But they also increased the rookie max. So the the max is 975,000 for this year, which is what Mitchkov got. And then next year's picks will also be at 975K. But then the year after that, the last year of the contract, is when the ELCs will hit that magical $1 million mark.
Yeah, I mean, those are great numbers. I mean, certainly a little bit more than minimum wage in this country, but I'm not going to talk about that right now, Rachel. But what I am going to talk about is I amortized the 58 million in 2000, and that would be 105 million,
Uh,
942,000 right now.
that's
Yeah.
a lot of money.
So now you see
That's
what
a
I'm
lot of
talking
money.
about the danger zone. Like you've got to have that revenue coming on the other end to really back that up. Now, I know, listen, I'm not an expert. The league has their people and they project and everything else. But like anybody else covering any other sport, I always feel like there's a tipping point. And I feel like you never want to get to the tipping point.
Right, and that's why, looking at the revenue, I believe the Canadian media contract also expires the same year
Yeah,
as this current CBA. So that is going to be a huge,
massive
huge
deal.
part of this negotiation because they have to get that deal done before these contract negotiations because the players can't be like, well, I'll bend to this, estimation of the revenue and do the minimums and the max salaries and all of that based on an unknown media revenue number from Canada. I mean, that would be ludicrous to ask them that, right?
Yeah. I mean, right now, both sides are, there's a lot of niceties. But
Mhm.
again, we don't know what's going to happen when they start talking nuts and bolts. And that's why they need to start doing it in the next 6 months so they could really have a long time to hammer it out. But I know future Russ is going to say that I'm an idiot because that
Well,
usually doesn't happen.
so I think that, you look at that, you look at Gary Bettman and what his future is. When is he going to retire? Is he going to be a huge part of these negotiations? Is he going to
He
be
will be a
around?
big part of it. That will be his last negotiations. That's my
I
prediction.
believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. We've had 3 lockouts in the Bettman era. And to me, there's no way that Gary Bettman wants to go out on a lockout. Like, no way
Listen,
does he
I don't
want to
want
do
to.
that.
The last lockout, I was doing cosmetic sets in grocery stores and like ShopRites and everywhere from South
No,
Jersey to Northern Jersey. Like that's what I was doing. And I would go in with my headset and I would listen to music. I don't want to live that life anymore. I want to go live the hockey life. So I don't want
none
to
of
lock
us
out.
do. So, yeah, not the fans, not the players,
No.
not the owner. Nobody wants a lockout. But I do think Gary Bettman like wants to go out on a high note and say he set the league up for success in his retirement, and so
Yes.
he's gonna be a very firm and difficult negotiator here because he's going to want to get the owners everything um, that they want
And it's
because
Marty Walsh's first, right? So he's going to want to win
right.
on some things too.
Yep. So a lot of important personality aspects to this upcoming negotiation. We're going to talk about the key points of contention for that coming up next.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel has odds for Major League Baseball, the WNBA, the US Open, soccer, and so much more. Right now, I would bet for the Braves to be the final wild card. That would be my bet here.
Mm.
Just visit fanduel.com/locked on to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. You can find me there on Fridays. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to get to the poll results of what you think about grudges as it relates to players wanting to leave the
Grudges.
Flyers. Yeah, excited to talk about that later in the show. We'll have a new poll and a new nemesis of the week on Monday, so stay tuned for that. Getting back to our CBA conversation, I think that a huge part of it is going to be the structure of contracts because we have a lot of
Mhm.
contracts being signed right now that are quote unquote lockout proof, changing the financial structure of them in terms of signing bonuses so that guys are guaranteed the cash for the season where there could ostensibly be a lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as like for contract years, they should not ever exceed 8. For this sport to be healthy, 8 is the right number. Because you can see what ends up happening. The guy ends up, by the time that guy gets that contract, they end up what, like 25 or 6 if they're really good. Sometimes they get another contract before. Well, no, they have to get the 8 before. But usually they're like what, 24, 25, something like that. So then you're taking a hockey player into their 30s and it's a speed sport. And it's like, it's hard. And that's why if you go 8 years, you worry about those. Like, what do we say? Connect these 27.
Right.
So
Well, and do the owners want to shorten those contracts? And is there any realm of
they'll try to,
possibility?
but I don't think they'll win that one. So I think they're not all wanting to do that. Some of the owners do like locking up the players. They do. But so I don't think that's a winnable thing. But um, what they might do is say, just like the NBA, that like I think they have something I think that's called like a super max contract where you can kind of exceed the percentage of what you
Mhm.
can spend to the cap right now for one player. They might do
Right.
that. They might have an exception for that. And I could see that because it's getting close now. Like, as an example, with the Rangers and Igor Shesterkin, like, let's say he gets 12, 13 million. The percentage of cap is really for this, CBA, it's pretty high.
Right. And I think, if you look at what the NBA does with those supermax contracts and like in Major League Soccer, they have designated player assignments and in MLS, there's 3 players that you can exceed the cap
Right.
with. And so to me, it's like, is hockey headed in that direction? So you have like one designated player like that the cap doesn't matter for, or do you put in a luxury tax system where you allow teams to go
Nah,
over the cap?
it's failing. The luxury tax is failing in baseball. Like teams just try to avoid it, and the teams that want to do it, they do it for 1 year, then they make sure they're under it the next year. So it only helps. It only gives the bottom feeders money, and those teams never spend money. So it doesn't help like the full league. That's why that doesn't work. But as far as the supermax, I don't want a player to be able to get paid outside of what the cap is. I just think there should be a number that you say, okay, if the league standard was, and hey, you shouldn't or can't do more than 12% to the cap. Well, for one player, you could, you can go over that by 10% if you
Right.
want.
Yeah, I do think that makes sense. Now, I think there should be limitations on it
Yeah.
because it has to be like a multi-year contract
Yes.
player. You can't do it just for a 1-year deal to like say somebody wants to sign Sidney Crosby. Say he doesn't re-sign with the Pens, okay?
Right.
They want to sign him for 1 year on a supermax contract.
Which
Like,
just happened in the
is that
NBA.
reasonable?
Yeah. Which just happened in the NBA. And so Steph Curry signed a 1-year deal for
Mhm.
$62.6 million.
Right.
That
Right.
should not be allowed.
No, I disagree. That's the thing. Is like I don't think it should be allowed on a 1-year deal. I think you
Right.
have to have a minimum 2-year deal in order to be able to do something like that. But I do like the idea of it because there's always one player that you want to guarantee is going to stick around and is going to mess with your cap if you do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair. I think another big issue is going to be players and their rights as being unrestricted free agents or in teams wanting to maintain rights. And there's going to be some tension on those issues. So
Yes.
the ALC contract slides, like I think the players want to get rid of that so that they can gain their independence sooner. I think that, you look at there's a big difference now between junior players and NCAA players in terms of how long the teams can maintain rights of these guys and it all depends on age and years of experience. Like all
It's
of that should go
confusing. Let's
away,
be
right?
honest. The slide is
It's
it's
very
confusing.
it's
For
really
us, it is.
confusing.
Now, for
So
somebody who knows the CBA, sure.
yeah, I mean, and even if it's not confusing, it's still unfair that, players who are junior players don't have the same rights as college hockey players. And especially with the shift to more guys going to college,
Well,
like,
there's that
should,
lawsuit going on now, Rachel, for
well,
uh, junior players to be able to gain
mhm,
their independence to go into college hockey after they played a year of juniors,
yep,
which has been a bone of contention. So
yeah, all of that.
by the time the next CBA comes around, that they may have already won that case.
Yeah,
So
I
that could
think
be interesting.
yeah, it will affect the CBA though in terms of
Yes.
rights and what an RFA is, what it means, and then you look down the road from that. What does that mean for a qualifying offer, right? If a guy doesn't get a qualifying offer, they should be a UFA on the spot. It should not be age or pro years determined, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it should be on the spot.
So I think those are kind of like the biggest issues to me in terms of when do players get their quote unquote independence and owners, how long do they get to hold on to these guys for,
Right.
without really spending any money on them? I
So,
think that's
but I
really
did
the
see. I'm going to admit this. I did see on the liner notes that you talked about, healthcare, and I'm thinking, so you expecting Sidney Crosby to be retired, and now they'll all sign up for Crosby Care? Is that what you're talking about?
oh
Something
my
like that?
God, no. I think it's how long does their health care last in retirement and what's the coverage for it?
Ah,
That's what I'm talking about.
well, that
Is
could
like,
be covered under Crosby Care, like
yeah.
for the hockey players.
Sure, you name it whatever you want. I don't care. But there should be more significant medical and mental health and retirement support for players. I think they're going to try and fight for more of that, which is an issue for sure, but I think it's a smaller
I
issue
think the
than
program's gotten a
some of
lot
these.
better in the
It
last
has.
3 or 4 years for sure. The way they handle it, more players are taking advantage of it. There seems to be less shaming from
Yeah.
outside sources, and that's good.
I think the issue of LTIR exploitation is going to come up. Are they going to want
Nobody's
to
changing it.
change?
Nobody's
I
gonna
know
change
the
it.
owners love it because, well, Vegas loves it. Let's be
Most of them.
real.
There's a few that complain, but most of them
Yeah.
like the idea that they can do it.
Yeah. I think the possibility of adding to it by saying that if a player's on LTIR for the regular season and returns for the playoffs, the team is penalized with a cap overage going into the next season for a certain percentage of the overage.
That would be great. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be
Yeah,
great. And
I
I'm
know.
just going to tell you right now, no compliance buyouts. I know fans love
No.
them, but they are bad. Compliance buyouts are bad because the team will get rid of the guy. They'll get the compliance buyout, and that guy will sign for less to play for a winner. And you've lost the player, and big deal. So you've saved on the cap, but like you've lost a good player.
Yeah,
Who was
I
it?
think
Vinny
there's
LeCavier was
probably
the first one that kind of did that, right?
right. I
Did he
think
get bought out?
it's
Yeah.
there's probably a middle ground here where kind of the penalty gets increased for buying somebody out to more than it is now, or it extends one more year or something. The way the formula is that it's
Yeah.
more of a penalty to the team buying out the contract.
Yeah, it was LeCavier. I remember that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good. Don't do it.
No. And then another big one which you wanted to talk about is changing the draft year from 18 to 19. Why do you
19-year-old
think
draft.
that might come up?
Well, there's definitely been discussion about it, and it's very for there's a couple of reasons, but the biggest is it's really hard to scout players when they're 17 and 18 years old. Like, look at the advantage the NFL has in their draft. These guys that they're getting 22, 23, some are 24 because they take that fourth or fifth year now. You know what the difference is besides age and how much a player changes in those years and then knowing what you're drafting? It's huge. But
Mhm.
18 to 19 is a big deal. It is because you could honestly, if you go back as a fan and look at some of the guys that got drafted and you say they were rushed to the NHL too early and all these things, some of that could have been cured by just being in juniors for another year, overseas for another year, and just being a year older. So I'm all for that.
Yeah, I think so. I think for the Flyers, there are definitely some effects that all of this will have, especially with some contracts that are coming up. We're going to get into that, some rule changes that might require the CBA to address, and then we'll get to those poll results coming up next. Some of the best concerts of the year take place in the summer leading into the fall. It's my favorite time to head to a show. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for those concerts even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Gametime app is it's great for getting notified about last minute flash deals and super deals so you know you're getting the best bang for your buck. Best of all, they have all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate that feature. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. All right, so some of the potential rule changes that happen in the NHL, I think would require something in the CBA about them. And I think that, you look at fighting in the game a little bit. There may have to be something in the CBA to say, yes, if we're going to eliminate fighting from the game. I think that's something that the players would want some sort of negotiating rights on. And then I
We
think
do. I think we have to be realistic and say it's never going to get completely negotiated out. I think all that's going to happen with fighting is you may have bigger penalties and more, you know, ej- quicker ejections, bigger penalties, and larger suspensions. But I don't think it's ever going to be out of the game.
yeah, I think so too. But we'll see if that is in the CBA. And then equipment, like required safety equipment that the teams and players are required to provide. What are if they're required to have neck guards or like
Yeah,
the
like the
anti
AHL
skate,
just did that. Yeah.
yeah, like the skate blade protective
Hmm.
things and the socks. Like are the teams going to have to provide that for the players, and like how does that all work, and how much of it do they get? So there'll be some little stuff related to that in the
Yeah.
next CBA. And then as far as, what effect this might have on the Flyers, the year that the CBA is set to expire is the same year that the Flyers will have no goaltenders under contract. And so I think that when we look at Flyers contract negotiations, a lot of players are trying to sign those extensions now and get the money locked down.
Right.
And
That's
that's
what they
why,
always want to do.
right? So they have like that signing bonus structure that I talked about earlier that has a lot of like low salary, high signing bonus, all of that. Like, is that going to happen again for the Flyers, especially with these goaltender contracts, depending on how Fedotov does and Urson does?
I mean, I don't want to tell
as-
Danny Briere what to do, but what I would do is one of these goalies, I would give an extension to in a year. So in other words,
yeah,
this year is the proving ground for both goalies. Based on what happens this year, I will now designate who is my next 3 to 5 year goalie contract, and then Zabragin will be in play at that point as well, coming
yeah.
up the ranks as a backup. That's the way I would do it, and I think that makes the most sense. Will they do it? I don't know.
Yeah, interestingly, by Mitchkov coming earlier, the expiration of his ELC is after the new CBA is in
Right,
place.
right.
So I think depending on how it goes, that contract is going to be a huge aspect of how this will affect the Flyers.
It all depends how he plays.
I think so. I think so. But most of the other core guys are locked up. Beyond that,
Right,
everybody else is kind of a bridge player on this team.
right.
So it'll be all the newer draft picks that will be affected by
Yeah.
the new CBA. So stay
Yeah,
tuned, but
stay
happy
tuned for
Labor Day
sure.
weekend on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so looking at our poll results from the week about y'all and holding grudges, we asked, do you hold a grudge against players that want to leave the Flyers organization? Your choices were always and forever, yes in the short term, but it goes away quickly, depends on the circumstances, and no, it's just business. And depends on the circumstances was far and away the winner here at 68%, which is exactly what I thought it was going to be, because
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
most people are pretty logical and rational about these things. If the player says Philadelphia is a horrible city, it's a trash heap, and all the fans suck, and I never want to like be here again, that's different than we're trading away Simone Gagne to try and get him a cup, right?
Right.
Like, two different, or
Yeah,
Kimo Timonen when we sent him to the Blackhawks. Like,
right. But which one's number 2, Rachel?
Well, number 2 is always and forever, which
Which I
of
am not
course,
surprised at either.
no, because that's like the gamut, right?
Yes.
That is the
And that's
gamut.
it and it's not just the Flyers, it's every fan base.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's
I
not
just
exclusive to this area.
No, and that's the thing, is like I think you would find these results would be very similar in any fan base, and that was really my point.
Except for
Is
maybe the
that,
Canadians, they're a little crazy.
well, that's a whole other thing. But
That's another show.
I think that Flyers fans are generally no different than other
Right.
fans as far as this goes. I think we would get very similar results if
Yes.
we asked all of our Locked On NHL colleagues to put this poll out there, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely think that. Although I'm looking at the comments now, I might change my mind.
Well, but the people that have strong opinions are the ones that are going to comment, right? And
Well,
so
I mean, all right. Like, here's one I would question a little. Like, Wade Smith 5499. Giroux only scored 1,000 points for the organization. I've already tuned out. Like, that's not a lot of points. 1,000 points.
No. You're completely misreading that post.
So what is that?
So the initial post was by somebody that said, yes, they hold grudges, screw Giroux, right? So they're
Right.
saying Giroux's bad. This person is being sarcastic and saying Giroux
Oh,
only
I see.
scored
Okay.
1,000,
Oh, so I didn't see the sarcasm.
defending
Yes.
Giroux.
Because I feel that way. I feel the same way then, Wade. Because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, 1,000 points. Like, come on, man. You're right. He's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I get it.
So
I didn't
I
see
just
that
want to
little tab
defend
there.
this
Yeah, it's
commenter's honor
on my
here.
show notes. It's in small type, and I didn't see the little tab there. So okay, I get it now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's fair. As far as the Cutter Gauthier question, which is kind of partially what inspired this question in the first place. John White says if Drysdale stays healthy and produces like they think he can, Gauthier will quickly be forgotten. I think unless Cutter Gauthier turns into Connor McDavid, I think that's gonna be the case.
I would
I think
question what quickly is, because when he comes into town the first couple of years, they're gonna razz him a lot. Maybe
well,
year
because they only
3,
get one chance to.
right? But
That's
that
because
doesn't.
he's out in Anaheim.
But they're going to do it. So when does it stop? Does it ever stop? Like JD Drew, it never stopped, right? For the Phillies fans. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know either, but I think we'll see when it comes to Cutter Gauthier. That's for sure. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I hold exactly one sports grudge, and that is Chris Chelios. I will never like that man in the history of time because of the hit on Brian Propp in the playoffs in 1989, and that's the only sports grudge I have held
I'm
on
sure
to.
there's a few people saying they don't love Scott Stevens either. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, but even I don't like Scott Stevens, and I think what he did was terrible. My problem is with people who defend Scott Stevens. My problem isn't directly with Scott
Right.
Stevens, the person,
Right.
right?
Because it's not like he's the one who invented hitting a guy with his head down. He didn't.
No, he didn't. It was bad, and he shouldn't have done it. But it's more the people that defend him that I have an
Right.
issue with. But with
I
Chris
get that.
Chelios, it's Chris Chelios that I have the problem with, and I'll say it. I will 100% say it. Anyway, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back Monday. It's our last week before we have actual Flyer stuff to talk about. So that's exciting. We'll have our new poll question and nemesis of the week as well. And as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Let us know on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.